Hi everyone, I'm Amber with Little King Art. In today's video tutorial, you're gonna learn how to make pom-pom earrings. In this video, you'll learn how to make pom-pom earrings in different shapes and sizes, and you'll learn how to bulk up and add different colors. And be on the lookout, you might hear my husband or even my son in the background who's coming up here right now. So thank you so much for watching and enjoy. All right, guys, we're gonna get started on our earring design. Here are the things that you'll need to create your earrings. You'll need some earrings, of course. I like this kidney shape. They're very easy. You don't need any special wire tools to bend anything because they're ready to go. But of course, there are so many different kinds of hoops that you can buy online, but the kidneys seem to be my favorite and the simplest, and simple is always great. You'll need some yarn. I've got some various colors. We're going to talk about doing colors by themselves, and we're going to talk about mixing and matching colors as well. You'll need some thread. You want some thinner thread, and then a sewing needle or a small plastic needle should work just fine too. And then I want you to have a really good pair of scissors. I know these work pretty well, but just in case I have a backup pair. Let's get started. So we're going to start with this pink color. Now, you usually like to work with thinner yarn when you're making pom-poms, especially for earrings. And we're going to wrap it 100 times, and I'm going to show you what it looks like when you do it less than that. I have this handy bowl. That's great. You can use a dish to collect all of your scraps. This yarn has already been undone, and I'm going to take the end and I'm going to wrap it around my fingers 100 times like that. So you don't have to watch me the whole time. I'm going to speed up the video and then I'll show you what to do after you wrap the yarn around your fingers, 2 fingers 100 times. I have wrapped it 100 times. I want to show you because it's going to happen sometimes. Thinner yarn has the tendency to get tangled really easily. I got really lucky and it just so happened to end after wrapping 100 times, but I want to show you what to do if that happens. Let's say you still had a little bit more to go, or even a lot more to go. If you can't get it untangled, you can cut that off and tie it. So I'm going to have to unwrap it a little bit and do an overhand knot. That's where you take the 2 ends, wrap it around your finger to create that loop. Take those 2 ends and thread it through the hole. Pull it nice and tight, make sure it's secure. All right. And trim off the tails. It's not going to hurt anything to make pom-poms to do that because most likely that little knot will be trimmed off later anyway. And then you would finish wrapping, cut it off, and now I gently took it off of my fingers. I'm going to take a piece of thread . The reason why we use a thinner thread than the yarn, even though the yarn is thin, it still would create some sort of indentation. So thread is always better. So you notice that I have an open end on each side and then it's wrapped on the top and bottom, right? The open parts where you had your fingers, you want them to lay right beside where your string is because that string is going to come up and cinch in those open spaces. So the closed parts are at the top and bottom, the open parts are at the sides. That is key number 1 to have a good pom-pom. And now you're going to tie the sides in. That little guy's poking out, that's totally fine. So I've got it cinched in, I tied it once. And then I like to flip it, tie it again, pull it, make sure it's nice and tight, And then one more time, no more flipping this time. We're knotting this in place. If you feel like you didn't get it tight enough, you can go around one more time and knot it again. I can tell I got it pretty tight. So at this point, it's okay if you trim these guys here. What you don't want to do ever is trim this middle one because it's keeping it all together. Now we're going to use our scissors and cut this closed part. Okay, those scissors are giving out on me a little bit. Now, these are super, super sharp, so I just have to make extra careful. I have to be extra careful and make sure I don't get that wrapped part right there. So we're going to cut these loops, and then I'll show you how to turn it into a nice looking pom-pom. Are you kidding me? All right, so I like to get a dish of some kind. I love this bowl. I use it just for collecting scraps. I'm gonna cut off a little bit more anytime I see those little loops. Just doing a tiny bit, and I'm kind of tugging on the outer edges. Not really like pulling it, because if you pull it, you could pull out the threads. But just making sure I'm on the edges. I like to fluff it. Now, of course, we're not going to leave all these pieces hanging out. We're going to start trimming it. I feel like my red scissors, yeah, will work well at this point. Those other scissors are my favorite scissors, but they are so sharp. I don't want to mess up my pom-poms. So notice how I'm holding my fingers in the middle, and I just rotate in a circle. And I just keep rotating, looking for little pieces that are uneven and poking out. And then I like to kind of roll it around, fluff it out. So this thread is standing out a little bit. So I'm going to kind of shimmy in there and cut off just the ends. So this could potentially almost be done. But I know that some of you like smaller pom-poms. So what you would do if you want it to be smaller, you just keep cutting into it. Cutting into it. And I know sometimes it looks like it's not going to do much, but as you keep trimming and trimming and trimming, it should get fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. At this point, we should be safe from cutting the center, but I still like to keep my fingers in the middle as I'm rotating. Sometimes you have to take your scissors and kind of poke out whatever that end is. And you could essentially keep trimming this until it's really tiny. I want it to be close in size with this guy, but I've seen people make really, really tiny ones. So I've found that wrapping 100 times is a pretty great number. You could even go up to 150, which it's gonna, of course, that's gonna use a lot more yarn. So you wanna make sure you have enough yarn, but it's gonna make it more dense. But I find that this 100 times for a thin yarn is pretty good. So you just have to keep fluffing and smushing, rotating it around. We're getting there. So that's how you can make a solid pom-pom. This one I think I could trim a little bit more, but I want to move on and show you a couple things. First of all, with this thin yarn, I want to show you what it looks like when you wrap it only 50 times. This didn't work out for 2 reasons. The yarn is so thin when you only do it 50 times, it doesn't get as fluffy. But also, I did not secure this enough and it's coming undone. So that's the other reason too. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like when that happens. Now we're gonna see what happens when we combine 2 different colors. I think these will be pretty together. This is great too. Let's say you have a yarn that's even thinner than this yarn. You should definitely combine it with another yarn. So let's combine some yarn to create some color mix poms. When you combine colors, you need to think about how you're basically doubling it up. So earlier, when I wrapped 100 times, when you have 2 different colors, I'm doubling up. You can actually wrap only 50 times because that's going to equal 100, right? If you did 150, it would be 100 times, it would be super dense. So I'm going to take this doubled up, put the tail here, and wrap it around 50 times since I've doubled it up. Okay, I've wrapped this 50 times because it's doubled up, so I did not need to wrap it 100. Trim off the tails. And we do the same thing. Gently take it off of your fingers. Take your thread. The open ends are facing the thread while the closed top and bottom are at the top and bottom. And I'm going to secure it one time, flip it, and do that again, and then knot it. That feels pretty secure. Trim off the little tails. And then we just start going around. My fingers are in the middle. Protecting that. Flip it and then get into those layers a little bit more. You might hear my son in the background occasionally. Mom life. So this is looking pretty good. Super colorful. I love this. So what you would do is just keep trimming it till you get to the desired size, and you could go significantly smaller if you like. But I love the color mixing. That's fun. You could take 3 colors and wrap it around, and you could still do that 50 times. And notice how dense this is because I did 50 times with 3 different colors. So I'm going to show you just so you can see what it looks like when you wrap 150 times when you do it by itself. I just want you to be able to see how big it is. So I'm going to wrap a single yarn by itself 150 times just so you can see what it looks like. Okay, I've wrapped this 150 times. I like to show you all the different examples so you can get an idea of what it is you'll like for yourself. I find wrapping 100 times, whether when you do a single, is perfect. 50 sometimes can be a little too small, but if it's a thicker yarn, you can do it 50 times. If you double it up, you can do it 50 times. 100 is that sweet spot when you're using that single thread of yarn, but 150 does look really good too. It just takes up a lot more yarn. So it's open on each sides, and I take the string Tie it once, flip it, and tie it again. Nice. And then not flipping it, just securing it, knotting it now. Perfect. Then you're going to take your scissors and go all the way around. Okay. All right. Woo. Fling it in the air. Fluff it. Now look at how much bigger that is. And it's going to be a lot more dense. But it honestly isn't drastically different from when you wrap it just 100 times. So I think 100 is that sweet spot for the single yarn. And if you double up your yarn, you only have to wrap it 50, because when you double it up, that makes it 100. But play around with it. My last class that I taught, it was actually literally my last class before this pandemic started. And all of my students were practicing with their different sizes. So now I'm going to show you how to hook it up to your earring. So I could definitely keep trimming this and make it smaller, and I could even go smaller than this. You could go even smaller, but I actually like this size. And I have another one here. And now I'm going to show you how to attach it to your earrings. Another tip I want to go ahead and tell you, because I've tried this myself, fabric glue. I found that honestly, it didn't work for me. I have a few pairs of Pom Pom earrings that I did not use glue, and they've never fallen apart, and they're great. A lot of my pom-poms I tried to use glue, and all it did was create this funky little section of my palm, and I didn't like how it looked or felt. So now I'm going to show you how to attach these to your earrings. Okay, now we're ready to add them to our earrings. The simplest way to add it to your earring is to unhook it, take your palm, and take this pointy part and put it straight in the center of the palm. Rotate it around, and then you kind of just tug it. Now you might have to you have to fluff it out a little bit, trim some edges, and then you could essentially just wear your earring like this. And if you wanted, you could get one of those little protectors that you put at the end of the hoop so it doesn't fall off. But since it's so long, the odds of it falling off are slim to none. So that's like the simplest thing you can do that with. Another way, just takes a little bit more time. You take your thread. This time you're going to need a longer piece of thread than what you've been using. Thread it through your needle. And I like to just tie it here. Sometimes I knot it just because I don't want it to go anywhere. Take your needle, take your small palm, put it directly in the middle of your palm. Go ahead and tie a little knot at the very end of your tail. Double knot, if you can get it in the same spot, is even better. Pull that gently, very gently, until I feel that that knot is there. We can trim this guy off later. So he's in there. Then I kind of line this part up, this part that you would hook it to, in the center. And I take my needle and go over the hook and bring it straight down the center. That's ish. Let me make sure I got it. Perfect. See, I put the thread, I'll pull it out a little bit, right on top of that loop. And we're just gonna keep sewing that to its place. So what you gotta do is take your needle, go from the bottom center, pull it up gently, give it a little tug until you feel that give, cross over where you know that little brass or gold pieces, stab the needle directly down the middle, gently pull it, and I would do that 1 to 2 more times. So a total of 3 or 4 times. Shoot it up the middle, straight up, give it a little tug, go over where that little hook is, pull it down. I did it 3 times. 3 or 4 is definitely good. I want to make sure I have enough to tie this off. I'm going to give this a little tug. Honestly, it feels super sturdy, so I think 3 is going to be good for me. And I'm going to shoot this needle up a little bit, just enough to make this tiny little loop, okay? Take your needle, bring it back down, and thread it through that tiny loop. And that'll knot it to itself. Give it a little tug and trim. If you feel like you want to knot it again, you definitely can. So I'm not going to go up into that, but I'm just going to trim around it. And you can push that in a little bit. I don't know if you can see, I could see my little threads. I don't want to cut those, so I just kind of smushed them in there. Though that looks like yarn and not threads. Okay, fluff it out a little bit. And now I'm just sort of fixing any spots that I see. Now, you're probably wondering how to hook it. You have to tug it out a little bit. Tug it, tug it, tug it. There you go. So you just have to play around with it. And when you go to hook it, you'll just have to make sure you get it underneath that little hook. But like I said before, it's so, I did mine a little tight. You could make it a little looser, so this is poking out a bit more, but you could also just wear it like that, and it's totally fine. You could trim it up a little bit, and then you would go ahead and add on your other earring. So I'll show you guys that one more time. Why not? I'm very impressed at how easy these plastic needles work. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim off the thread. Thread my needle. I'm just gonna show you one more time how to attach your earring. I'm gonna try to see if I can get away with just tying it once. And this is a little short, so I'll be cutting it too close. So I'm gonna take this little scrap piece that I have and tie it to the end. Do my little overhand knot that I did earlier when my yarn was running out. Perfect. Give it a little tug. Trim it. Perfect. Now let's say you didn't want knot the end of your thread. It's totally fine. You still would want to move to the end. And if you didn't do a knot, what I like to do is come back in there and then bring it back up. Then it feels a lot more secure, and then I could sew it on to this little loop here. You can even go ahead and put your thread through there, bring it down to the center, and then stab the needle down the center, bringing it down the bottom. tugging, making sure it's there. Shoot this up through the center-ish. Bring it through the loop. So that's what happens when you don't knot your thread to the needle. I was hoping I would get lucky this time around. Do, do, do. Do, do, do. Okay. And then looks like I was going down here. Let's give that a little tug. At this point, I could tug it out if I know I want to be able to hook this later. Make sure I tug it out, and I'm going to just go one more time. I'm cutting it close, but I can tell that this needs to be a little bit more secure. And now I'm going to sew it in. So I stab it in there and pull it through that loop. Give it a tug. And trim off the tail. This one needs a little bit of trimming. And then you would just shape up your earrings at this point. I love how lightweight they are. And if you decide at the end of the day that you don't like the way your earrings look, I definitely need to trim them up a little bit more. If you decide that you don't want to wear them like this and you want to try again, it's super easy to take these out. You would just find that little thread and pull these out. But I like these. I'm just going to shape them up a little bit more. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you have any questions at all in regards to mixing your yarn, how many times to wrap it, anything like that, I love your feedback. This always makes my future videos better. So yeah, just send me a message if you have any questions. Thanks again for watching. Thank you so much for watching my video tutorial on how to make pom-pom earrings. I always appreciate your support. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me, or you can message me if you go to littlekingarts.com. There's a special section where you can contact me. While you're on my website, check out the kits and the other things I have in my shop. You can also go to my Instagram at littlekinart, where I have free video tutorials in my IGTV. Thanks so much. Stay safe and keep creating. Bye.